God bless everybody. It is January 2nd of 2024. Now, I wanted to go over a few studies before I break down the changes in the paradigm that I want to give to you by the end of the week, because I think it's extremely important that you understand where I'm coming from when I show you these changes and how they're going to affect you, I believe, between now and February 5th. Okay, so it's extremely important that I show you all these different teachings and then lay that into the paradigm so you can sort of see how that's changed. Now, there's not been a huge number of changes, but I had made one error, and I want to bring that to your attention when I do bring up the paradigm. And because I went back and double checked my work, I found this, and it's led me to a interesting place that I think you all need to be aware of. So I want to go through Daniel 8 first, because I think it's extremely important that we look at all these different prophets and how they laid this out and how it's stipulated in the Bible. And I believe you can see that the change that I made seems to work with the Bible as you move through these different books and chapters. Now, first of all, I want to explain that I've been working on this for a few days, so I'm a little tired, and so I hope that I do a good job at presenting this information to you properly, because I think it is extremely important as we move forward in the next 4 to 5 weeks that we see what's going on out here. It's that important. So I've talked about for years how I believe Daniel 8 is pivotal to understanding what's coming into the Middle East, and I still believe that. Turkey is going to invade into Syria and Iraq soon. I believe potentially in the next week or two. We'll see how that works out based on the paradigm and where I show he might do an entry point, and that it would matter to the Kurds, which are the Medes, and that once these Kurds and Medes align with Iran or Persia, we would see the nation of Turkey crush both these nations. But based on what I just found, the time and the way it happens has changed a little, but I believe that it will actually show you a totally different optic, and I believe you will actually see that it works within the paradigm and it makes more sense. Now realize I am trying to figure this out from the Bible and what he's telling us, not from what I'm trying to discern. Now, I have put this paradigm together with the parable of the fig tree chart. And I've always said that I believe that the parable of the fig tree chart is right. Whether I can get the paradigm to work with it, as it has been so far, and move it forward into the future and make it all still work, we'll see. But I believe Daniel 8 will actually start to show you some of these optics and why I believe this was a very profound change, and how I believe it's going to affect us as we move through the next month or so into February 5th and forward from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go through Daniel 8 in its entirety, and I'm going to show you why it breaks down the way it does and how I see this a little bit different now because of this profound thought that I had, and how it actually showed me that I had a mistake on my paradigm that I've adjusted. And from that, I've had to sit back and really rethink this whole process and realize that we're close. But I believe that this now gives us a better optic into the next month or so as we move forward. And that's what's important, is this really affects us in the next couple months here. And because of that change, it didn't really affect the storyline at all. It just adds to the time frames that we're in now, and so I think that's why it's so important. So let's look at this, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not going to read everything word by word here. You sort of, if you followed me at all, you should know Daniel 8 at this point. So I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly because I think it's extremely important that we get this information out. And then I have a number of videos out there than this one that I want to get out before the end of the week. So I want to get all them done. So let's look at what's going on here. So when you get into Daniel 8, he has a vision. It's in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar. It appears to Daniel, and he sees this vision. He's standing in the city of Shush, Iran, in the palace of Shush, Iran, in the province of Elam. He sees this vision, and he's standing by the river Ulai. So I just wrote this note that Daniel is standing in Shush, Iran, in the province of Elam, and he's standing by the river Ulai. He lifts up his eyes, and what does he see? He sees a ram with two horns, and the one horn is higher than the other horn on the ram. And so what he's equating this to is the Medo-Persians, because he tells you that you need to look at the silver breast and arms in Daniel's dream of Nebuchadnezzar's statue in Daniel 2. You know where you are in time in that past. You'll know where you are in time in the future, because you have to deal with Iraq, you have to deal with the Medo-Persians, and then you have to deal with Turkey coming up. So you saw that happen when Saddam Hussein fell. Now you're getting ready to watch Iran fall, and now you're going to watch Turkey come into the game, and they will also fall as we move forward. And these events are actually starting to form and happen right now as we're speaking. So Daniel sees this ram with two horns. He knows that when he sees it, he's talking about Iran and the Kurds. And I've talked about how Erdogan's been trying to genocide these Kurds for a long time, since 1984. And so it's been going on almost 40 years. They've killed almost 40,000 people in this confrontation between the Medes and the Kurds and Turkey over the last 40 years. And so this is a real problem, and Turkey is getting ready to go down against the Kurds. I noticed the other day, I did a report on an article where the Kurds have actually refortified all their front lines up against Turkey. And Turkey then also sent fortification troops down to their bases that they have in Syria and Iraq. And so they're fortifying their lines. And so there's going to be a breakout of a war in this area fairly soon. But Daniel sees this ram. It's got two horns. He knows that one's higher than the other, so we're talking about Iran being the higher horn. We're talking about the Kurds being the other horn. And so if you look at Daniel 8, you're going to realize that these two nations are going to align, and then Turkey's going to come down and destroy them here soon. So what he's saying here is the ram pushed westward towards Israel, northward towards Turkey, and southward towards Egypt, and no one stopped him. So he's been doing this for decades. Okay, for a long time, Iran has been unimpeded in the Middle East, and he's been doing basically what he wants. And so no one has basically been doing anything to Iran, and they've gotten away with basically everything. Up to the point where we've had about 105 of our bases hit in just the last few months, and we've barely done anything to try to retaliate against them. And so Iran is basically doing anything they want. Today, I just noticed that one of our ships, our Gerald Ford aircraft carrier groups, moved out of the East Mediterranean Sea, and Iran just placed a warship group into the Red Sea, and so they've now shut basically the Red Sea down again, and you've watched oil spike just overnight. And so that's extremely important that you keep up with all these different reports. So Iran was basically unimpeded. It became great. It's gotten money from us and everybody else on the planet through their transportation of oil and other different things like that. And so Iran has used these billions of dollars to build their war machine so that they can use it with their proxies, because Iran has been running proxies against Israel and the U.S. From Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, West Bank, Yemen, and other places without any deterrence for decades. And so this is a real big problem. And so you'll notice that I'm not changing the verses. The verses come right out of the King James Version of the Bible. I'm just showing you what it means as we move forward into history or into the future from what we see is in the past. And I've talked about this past to future prophecy forever and how we're going to see basically the same thing in the past happen in the future. If we know our history, we would know how that's going to happen as we move forward into the next just about 4 years. We'll see all this play out. So you're watching all these proxies hit all these different regions. It's affecting the Kurds, it's affecting Israel, it's affecting all these different groups. And then it says here, I was considering there was a he-goat. And so now we're talking about this goat that comes across the whole earth. In Daniel's day, it would just be the Middle East. He would not have known about the United States. And the Bible is centristic around Israel and Turkey. So that's extremely important that you keep your center of gravity where it belongs and not radiate out too far from where the Bible tells you to go. And you can see those nations in Nebuchadnezzar's statue in the history of the Jews and their captivity, and that would then give you the right footprint so you understand where this all takes place. And you can see that in chapter 2 of Daniel. So he sees this goat and it doesn't touch the ground, and it comes and it strikes the ram and it basically destroys it. Okay, so we're going to not go through this too much. I want to show you the interpretation and why this matters to you. So Turkey invades Syria and Iraq. They attack the Kurds or the Medes. They force them to align with Iran and Persia over time, and then Turkey comes over and smashes both of these nations. Okay, so it's extremely important that when we get into verse 8, he explains something extremely important here. So it indicates that the goat waxes very greatly and it becomes strong. And then the great horn is broken. Now I've talked about how Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is the Erdogan, which is the first seal of Revelation, would be destroyed on the sixth seal by the wrath of the Lamb. And that is getting ready to happen because you're already in the seals and they're already breaking. And so you're walking into a potential sixth seal event, which I've been talking about sometime around January, February, forever now. And so you need to understand that we're getting ready to see that event happen. But it indicates that for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. Now we talked about this many times, and so I broke this down so I gave you all these pointers so you can actually see what I'm talking about here as we move forward. So you have this goat that comes very strong and then it is broken. Okay, so if Erdogan is the white horseman, like I think he is, and that's my opinion, that's my concept that was given to me through God in these images, that the white horseman of Revelation is Erdogan of Turkey, and that he would bring a quarter of the world into war. He would bring the other three, or the next three seals with him. And then on the fourth seal, as you're going to see here as we move forward, we actually watch Hades and hell move on the fourth seal to his destruction on the sixth seal. So that's extremely important to understand that we are watching the bottomless pit or this abyss move to the destruction of Gog or this white horseman on the sixth seal through the wrath of the Lamb in Revelation 6:16, which is different than the wrath of God or the Father in Revelation 15:1, which are the seven bowls. And we're not appointed for those bowls of wrath. But you are here till the seventh trumpet, and so you need to be aware of what's coming up in the next 3.5 or to 4 years as we move forward. Now I've talked about how these four winds matter. On the seventh seal, they're held back, and then they're released on the sixth trumpet. And you're going to see that as we move forward here, because I've laid this all out so you can actually see this stuff. Okay, so Turkey will be broken or destroyed along with the 10 nations of radicalized Muslim on the sixth seal event. Then, right after that sixth seal event, and all 10 of these nations are destroyed, and I'm going to show you this on the paradigm when we get there, but we're going to just work on the concept of Daniel 8 right this moment, okay? So this is extremely important. We don't get off topic here. So Turkey is broken or destroyed along with the 10 nations of radicalized Muslim on the sixth seal. Then we have the seventh seal is broken. And then if you go into Revelation 8:1 and 2, if it's a literal statement, it says that when the seventh seal is broken, there's about a half an hour of silence that occurs in heaven, which is about 7.5 days on earth. Because if you use the prophetic calendar of 1,000 years of ours to 1 day of God, and use the prophetic calendar of 360 days, and you break that down, you'll realize that 1 hour of God's time is 15 days on this planet Earth. And so that's extremely important. So when he talks about a half an hour of silence occurs in heaven, that's about 7.5 days on earth itself here. And so that's extremely important that we understand what God means by these terms. You know, when he means an hour of power, or he gives you have an hour of God's wrath, you know, what does that mean? Well, an hour of God's wrath is about 15 days. So that's extremely important, and you'll see that when you get into the paradigm, because it falls between the Feast of Trumpets and the Feast of Tabernacles, which is 15-day holiday. And that has to happen during that time, because he has to fulfill the fall feast of, I believe, 27 in this case, because we're looking at Psalm 90:10 and the strong generation of Israel, which is founded on May 14th of 1948 and expands out to May 14th of 2028. And you look at Psalm 90:10, he indicates clearly that all things should happen prior to that strong generation completion, and that they would fly away prior to that. So that's why I always take you to the fall feast of 27, because it's extremely important. Well, let's get back to here. Right now we're sitting around Revelation 8 verse 1 and 2, and so we're talking about a literal statement in that, and it says that the seventh seal is broken. We have about a half an hour of silence in heaven, which is about 7.5 days on earth. And then during that seventh seal, we have the selection of the 144,000 elect, which are chosen. And it also indicates that the four winds are being held back. When are the four winds released? They're released during the sixth trumpet. So that's extremely important that you understand. During the seventh seal in Revelation 7:1, if you go look at that, it indicates that the four winds are being held back on that seventh seal. But if you go to the sixth trumpet, you're going to realize that they're being released on the sixth trumpet when Antichrist and the false prophet rise, when Satan is finally thrown from heaven and is placed on this earth for the short period of time of the 1260 days prior to abomination. So up here on the sixth seal, you have these 10 nations basically getting destroyed. Okay, because Turkey is going to get broken. Okay, so it's extremely important that you understand that this happens to 10 full nations in Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39, and these 10 nations will be broken. Okay, then you have that seventh seal, the half an hour of silence, the 144,000 are selected, and then those 10 regions melt down into 4 regions. You can see this also in Daniel 7:24, because it indicates that 10 nations start first, and then after them we see a little horn come out, and 3 other regions capitulate. So you've got to realize that 10 nations form first. Once those are destroyed through the sixth seal event, they break down into a residue of 4 regions. Little horn comes out, which is Antichrist, overthrows 3 regions, and then basically creates a beast kingdom out of that footprint of those 4 regions, which is the same footprint as Alexander the Great's footprint, which is the same footprint as the Ottoman Empire's footprint in the past during World War I. And so when you go back and you can look at those footprints, you'll realize that this is the same footprint that Erdogan is getting ready to rebuild. Now, he's indicated when he had his 100-year ceremony on October 29th of 23 that he was the new Muslim leader of the world, and that he was going to bring in the new centurion 100 years of the new Ottoman Empire in 23. So during this ceremony on October 29th of 2023, they had the 100th year anniversary of the time when the Ottoman Empire was destroyed in World War I during basically 1923. Okay, and so he just had this on October 29th of 23, and he indicated clearly that he was the Muslim leader and that he was going to rebuild this new Ottoman Empire in the next 100 years with his legacy as him being the new Sultan, and he was going to bring this upon the world as we move forward. Now, another thing that you should realize is Erdogan has been on a world tour talking to all the Muslim people that will side with him in the last couple months since the October 7th attack from Hamas into Israel. And so he's been going out to all these different functions, talking to these leaders in private, trying to set up his alliances. And I believe he has set up his alliances for Ezekiel 38 and 39, because if you look at where he's been in the last couple months, he's been in Sudan, Ethiopia, he's been in Libya, he's been in all these locations, Azerbaijan, all these locations. He's actually going to Iran on January 4th, which I think is extremely important because we're talking about those dates between January 6th and February 5th that are coming up here. And so Erdogan right now is getting ready to have a meeting with the Iranian leader on January 4th because they're getting ready to do an invasional attack. And I think if you look at how this is laid out, and I'm going to try to explain what I'm talking about here. If you go to Ezekiel 38 and 39, which I'm going to explain as we move through the week, you'll realize that Persia is the first one listed after the leader of Turkey is indicated there. It doesn't say that they've been absorbed. It says that there's this coalition that Persia's in that attacks Israel. And so what I'm looking at is, if you look at Daniel 8 and then we move it into these other prophets, you're going to see a transition here that really matters to you as we move forward in the next couple months. And what that transition is this. I believe Erdogan has already positioned the 10 nations for an attack on Israel. He's already had all the meetings. Everybody already knows what their job is. Every one of these nations of Ezekiel 38 and 39 has been basically addressed by Erdogan in the last couple months since the October 7th attack from Hamas onto Israel. So he has now aligned all these nations. So I thought originally we would see Daniel 8 happen first, and then 10 nations would go over to Iran. And that will happen. But you're going to see an attack on Iran first, because there's two sieges, if you remember in my paradigm. There's a siege right off the bat, and then there's another siege 18 months later. And that matters to what is going to happen here as we move forward in this paradigm and through Daniel 8. So let's look at Daniel 8 again, and I'll show you what I'm talking about and how this is going to affect you, I believe, in the next couple months. So we just broke the seventh seal. The half an hour of silence has occurred. 144,000 are selected. The four winds are being held. And then the 10 nations that have been destroyed in the sixth seal up here have been neutralized down into 4 regions that come out of destruction of the vacuum of the 10 nations of radicalized Muslims that were destroyed on the 6th seal event by the wrath of the Lamb or the Son, Jesus, in Revelation 6:16. This is different than God's wrath or the wrath of the Father, which occurs in the 7 bowls phase in Revelation 15:1. Okay, because the bowls are all about Revelation 15, chapter 15 and 16. And if you go from Revelation 10:7, and John sees him hand him a scroll, and he says, I'm not going to blow the 7th trumpet here, and I'm going to put you in a vision. You're going to have a vision for basically 4 chapters, and when you come out in Revelation 15:1, the 7th trumpet is going to blow at that very moment, and the mystery of God will be complete. And if you look at Revelation 15:2, you will see the rapture event occur at that very moment there, from the sea of glass, of all those people standing there from great tribulation. They're standing there waiting with harps in their hands because they've been taken up, and it clearly indicates they're from great tribulation in that passage there. So it tells you that 4 regions form after the 10 nations fall first. And you can see that in Daniel 7:24 also. It indicates 10 nations start to begin with, they start this mess, then they're reduced down to 4 regions, and then a little horn comes out and basically overtakes the other 3. Same thing is indicated here. And it indicates that out of one of them came forth a little horn, Antichrist, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. So he indicates this in a very specific manner, towards the south, towards the east, and then towards the pleasant land. I've talked about this for a while. Erdogan will invade Syria and attack the Kurds, which will drive them to the east. He will then go through Lebanon, down in through Israel, down into Gaza, and then attack Egypt. But then he'll be pulled back to Tyre, go to Iran through the Kurds. The Kurds will align with Iran. Turkey will destroy them, and then he will bring back his armies as Antichrist and literally attack Israel a second time 18 months later, as I've shown you on the paradigm many times. And if you've not seen the paradigm, I'm going to do videos as we move forward. You're going to have to look at this video first, and I will explain this as we move forward, because there's a lot of information here I have to explain first before we go to these new changes. You need to understand what the prophets are saying first, and then you can look at the paradigm and determine whether there's any validity to it or not. So, and I also want to show you that mistake I made, because it's extremely important. And when I do make a mistake, I will point it out to you. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to show you my findings and be an analysis, the analysis that I'm giving you, so that you get the best information so you can make the best choices. It's not about anything other than that. So when I give you this information, I'm human and I do make mistakes, and this one may be made for a reason, because we're at the pinnacle of this literally possibly happening as we move forward in the next couple of weeks. So Antichrist will attack in this order. So Gog is destroyed on the 6th seal. Then you have a resurrection of event, because what happens? The 7th seal occurs. You have this 4 trumpets right after that, because you have the selection of the 144,000, and then 4 trumpets sound, which devastate a third of the planet, and then a 5th trumpet, which is the bottomless pit opening, and then a 6th trumpet, which is the Antichrist and the false prophet rising. So by the time you get to Antichrist here, and you've gone through these first set of 5 or 6 trumpets to the rising of Antichrist, you've had a quarter of the world under war through Gog and Ezekiel 38 and 39 and Daniel 8, which is still happening. you have a third of the planet decimated by 4 trumpets prior to the opening of the pit on the 5th trumpet and the rising of the Antichrist and the false prophet on the 6th trumpet. And then the Lord would come back on the 7th trumpet. You're now getting ready to watch the 6th trumpet sound here, as I show you here. So this little horn Antichrist rises and he becomes extremely great. He attacks down towards the south, towards Gaza and Egypt. He attacks towards the east, towards Iran, and then he comes back and attacks towards the Pleasant Land or Israel. So Antichrist will attack in this order. He'll go to Egypt, then he goes against the Kurds in Iran and Persia, and then he will come back to Israel based on the paradigm that I have and the charts that I've been showing you. August 4th is actually the date when the second siege of Jerusalem would occur, and we would have that leader Reuben Revlin, which is Zedekiah, then captured and taken away. His sons are killed, his eyes are removed, and then he's removed to Turkey on that very day. And so it's extremely important that these events fall between January of 2024 and August of 2025, that is approximately 18 months later, and so that reflects what happened in the past, which could happen in the future. Now, once the 6th trumpet sounds, and you have the bottomless pit opening on the 5th trumpet, okay, so that's extremely important. Then right after that, we have the 6th trumpet, and that's when the false prophet and the Antichrist both rise. And this is the little horn that then overthrows 3 other regions and then creates a caliphate to Antichrist, okay? And so what I mean by that is when the Antichrist comes out, he's going to create a caliphate against the Jews and the Christians. Okay, so it's going to be extremely important that you understand that during the 6th trumpet, you see 2 billion Muslims basically unleashed on the planet against the Christians and the Jews, and that's going to affect us greatly as we move forward. So you're going to have 4 regions formed from those 10 nations, and they're going to then die all on the 6th seal. So the 10 nations die on the 6th seal. You're going to have the 4 regions form from those 10 regions, and then the Antichrist forms a beast kingdom, which is the 8th kingdom or last kingdom, because the Ottoman kingdom was the 7th kingdom, which was the feet of clay and iron. And so you need to understand what that kingdom was. We know that Nebuchadnezzar was the kingdom of the head of gold, and he was actually the 3rd kingdom on the history of the Jews, because we had the Egyptians and Assyrians prior to the Egyptians, and we know that Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold, and so we can follow this in time. And so once you have that 7th kingdom destroyed, which is the Ottoman Empire on the 6th seal, the Ottoman Empire is gone and it's destroyed. And so then we see a beast kingdom form from the residue of these 4 regions above. And so the Antichrist forms a beast kingdom, 8th kingdom or last kingdom from the 4 remaining regions. It's the same footprint as the Ottoman Empire of World War I or the 7th kingdom or the footprint of Alexander the Great in the past. It's exactly the same footprint, or pretty much the same. So if you don't believe me, listen to what Daniel's talking about here, and I'll explain to you what he's telling you and why it matches up with what I've been telling you all the time. And it matters to you that you see these events and how they're occurring in front of you. So it talks about this horn, Antichrist, waxed greatly, and it's cast down with some of the host of the stars, which are the angels. You can see that in Revelation 13. You can also see that in Isaiah 14, where Satan is literally being thrown down, and a third of the angels or stars fall with him. And I've talked about how they potentially could be impregnating or resurrecting other additional beings, because we talked about Gog being resurrected out of this abyss into an Antichrist, and so possibly other other angels are resurrecting other beings in the Nephilim or other types of things on this planet. And so it will be a very supernatural event that's occurring in front of us. And so here he's talking about Satan being thrown from heaven, cast down with the stars, and brought down to the earth. So Antichrist will exalt himself in heaven and be cast down to the earth on the fifth trumpet when the bottomless pit opens. Archangel Michael stands on both sides of the bottomless pit and throws Satan from heaven to earth on the fifth trumpet. The fifth trumpet is an extremely important event because it's when the bottomless pit opens. Remember, it's being moved on the fourth seal to this resurrection event that's happening now, which is the death of Gog on the sixth seal, being buried and then resurrected here. The bottomless pit opens and smoke rises from it. Satan is given a key to the bottomless pit as he falls from heaven. You have 5 months of scorpion stinging man without the seal of God. A third of the angels will fall from heaven with Satan. You can also see that in Revelation 12:4. That's extremely important also. So he magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. The prince of the host, which is Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39. The host is Satan. Okay? The host is going to bring the prince back as a dead Gog into an Antichrist as you watch this move forward. So he magnifies himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. So what he's talking about is the prince of the host is actually Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is Erdogan, and that he will be resurrected into this Antichrist figure, because Satan, when he's being thrown down from heaven to earth, literally does not... He's not Antichrist. He's controlling these two beings, Antichrist and the false prophet. So he's controlling them, and you don't really see Satan on the ground. You see all these other things. The only time you really see Satan on the ground is when he's exorcised in Armageddon on the sixth bowl and the three frogs come out, and then he's bound for 1,000 years, and the false prophet and the Antichrist are thrown in the lake of fire at that time. And you can see that from Revelation 16. If you go directly to chapter 7 or chapter 20, you'll realize that it's you have the mystery Babylon vision in between, which is between chapters 17 and 19. So if you go from Revelation 16 to Revelation 20, it picks up the story and moves chronologically forward. So this prince of the host, which is Satan, is going to be resurrected into an Antichrist, because Satan is literally impregnating and resurrecting a dead Gog that's been buried or at least placed in a tomb, and then he comes out shortly after that. And I believe that it will somewhat mimic the resurrection of Jesus, because I believe that once he is put in this tomb, he will resurrect for approximately 3 days after that, and so it will actually mimic the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, but it will actually be like an Allah figure, and it will be Islamic and not really our Lord Jesus. And you should know that, because if you know the Bible, then you'll realize that the Lord comes back on the seventh trumpet, and this guy that comes up on the sixth trumpet cannot be anything but Antichrist. And you also see the false prophet come up. And about the same time, the two witnesses are going to come out. And you're also going to see a signing of a treaty shortly after that. So you know that Antichrist comes prior to the Lord Jesus coming back. So I'm going to say some couple things here, because I am doing some speculation here. And I want you to realize that, because I'm trying to figure this thing out. And I'm trying to inform you of what I've found, and you can either take that information and use it, or you can put it on a shelf and wait and see what happens in the next few months. Look, I want you to go out and look this stuff up yourself and compare stuff. And that's one of the reasons I made a mistake, because nobody caught the mistake on my chart. I actually caught it myself, and so I wanted to explain that when we move forward because it matters to it compressed it to where we're actually right there, and so I need to explain all this stuff to you guys. So I believe Erdogan, before he invades, because he's rebuilding the Neo-Ottoman Empire with these 10 nations that he's already talked to, that he will actually do a ceremony prior to the actual invasion because they're Muslims and they believe in God, and so they're going to do a ceremony prior to the invasion, which would then force him into a cycle that moves us forward in the paradigm, and that is that Gog of Ezekiel or Erdogan would have to stop the continual burnt offerings or daily sacrifices 30 days prior to the signing of the treaty of the 7-year Treaty of the Nations with AntiChrist. Okay, that's extremely important. Yes, there is a transition from Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39 into Antichrist here called the sixth seal event. We just went over that in depth. How Erdogan's a white horseman, he's going to die on the sixth seal and then turn into an Antichrist on the sixth trumpet through a resurrection event. Okay? Erdogan will have a Neo-Ottoman Empire ceremony stopping the daily sacrifices or continual burnt offerings just prior to his invasion into Syria and Iraq against the Medes or the Kurds. Now, I'm going to explain this as we move forward, and this is where the minor changes have happened and why I'm seeing this a little differently and why I want to explain it to you so that you can understand where I'm coming from, because I always do this stuff in great detail so you see where all these pieces are coming from. So Turkey is broken or destroyed approximately 30 days or less after the invasion into Syria and Iraq, along with 10 nations of radicalized Muslims on the Sixth Seal event. And if I'm right, you're going to see that happen around, I believe, based on the paradigm, January 30th of 2024. And I know that sounds extremely fast, but I believe that I can show you in the paradigm how this actually plays out. So on my charts, I've adjusted them to where I see potentially an invasion by Turkey on January the 6th. And that's extremely important date, especially in our world, because that was when the Capitol riots or whatever they want to call them happened in our country. But based on the paradigm and this date that I'm going to show you as we move forward on the paradigm, January 6th matters to where we're moving. And then you have this January 15th date that I've talked about, which is 10 Tevet in 588 BCE, which was the actual siege on Jerusalem, which I can believe if Erdogan invades on the 6th, then he would then signal to all these 10 nations to attack Israel on the 15th, and then we would see a destruction of all these 10 nations 15 days later, because that would be the hour of power. He gives them between the 15th of January to the 30th of January, and then they would be destroyed on the sixth seal event. I've also talked about this in 2 Kings 24 and how we would see those 4 proxy nations attack Israel right after Turkey prepares for an invasion into Syria, and so that's extremely important also that you look at 2 Kings 24. It talks about it right off the bat. It goes right into the invasion of Turkey, and then it talks about these 4 proxies that literally attack Israel. And then that brings Turkey also down, and they form against Israel as we move forward, as I've been explaining to you. So I know I'm reiterating a few things here, but I want to make sure you understand what's going on here. So Turkey would come down into Syria around January 6th. All 10 nations would attack around January 15th, and they would be decimated on January 30th of this year. Okay? That would be the sixth seal event around January 30th, based on how I've isolated this down. We have a seventh seal, which is broken. You have the half an hour of silence. You have 144,000 selected, and then the four winds are being held back until the sixth trumpet is sounded. The first four trumpets sound, and a third of the world is destroyed. You've already had a quarter of the world under war up here, and so the world is a mess at this point. I believe this will occur in the communist areas of the world and won't affect prophecy of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The fifth trumpet occurs, the bottomless pit opens, smoke rises from it. Satan is given the key to the bottomless pit as he falls from heaven. 5 months of scorpion stinging men without the seal of God occurs at that time. Sixth trumpet. Once Antichrist and false prophet rise on the sixth trumpet, the four winds are released from the Euphrates, are told to prepare for the 1260 days, 3.5 years, or 42 months, that a third of men will be killed or slain by 2 million Muslim horde, which will be released on the world against the Christians and Jews through a caliphate that's built through Antichrist, and that the Jews and Christians will be forced to convert to Islam or be killed, because when he resurrects, he's going to look like it's Jesus coming out of this hole, okay? But it's not. It's Antichrist, and he clearly tells you you should be watching for this because you don't want to be caught in this trap. In my opinion, Antichrist is from this dead Erdogan or Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39 in Turkey. God sends down fire against these nations that attack Israel. The leader of Turkey will be in his land when this occurs, and so Erdogan will die in Turkey, and they'll bury him there, and so it will be a fairly quick funeral. It'll happen in a couple days, and then he'll resurrect approximately 3 days after he's been buried. Just as the Lord resurrected himself when he was resurrected in his time in the first coming. Now, I also indicate that I reference Isaiah 14 in this topic, as it shows Satan being thrown from heaven during the fifth trumpet event, but Satan never touches the grave, and being forced from the abyss or hell, an abominable branch called Antichrist, which springs forward out of the grave into a supernatural being. Also, Hades and hell are moving to the resurrection event on the fourth seal. So this Hades and hell, all this is moving to this resurrection event on the fifth and sixth trumpet. We indicate that since Satan is controlling the Antichrist and the false prophet, he is not actually seen, but is allowed to control both these individuals for 1260 days, or the 3.5 years, or the 42 months prior to Abomination of Desolation. Abomination of Desolation occurs on my chart on July 19th of 2027 on the paradigm chart, and that has not changed. Once Antichrist appears, the four regions convert to one beast kingdom under the control of Antichrist. Antichrist, or the little horn, which is now a resurrected Erdogan or Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39, overthrows the other three regions. These three regions create a caliphate and are just basically absorbed into this beast kingdom. And so when Antichrist resurrects himself, or Satan resurrects Antichrist out of the grave during this ceremony where they're having this burial of him, and 3 days later he comes popping out of the grave, they're going to take notice that he's not normal, okay? He's a totally different being, and the supernatural and the false prophets coming up and all this things happening, and the two, look, you got a lot going on here. This is a supernatural event, and we're going to see basically this little horn come out as a resurrected Erdogan or Gog. He overthrows the three regions. The three regions create this caliphate, and they just capitulate, and they're just absorbed. They, when these three other regions see this Antichrist, they're not going to be able to war against him, and they think that he's Allah, so they're just going to follow him. And so it indicates that after they see this resurrection event of Antichrist on the sixth trumpet, the Muslims will think he's Allah and they will just follow him. They won't even question it. So it'll be a quick transition. And if you think about it, Satan, once he's thrown down and impregnates Antichrist, he only gives him 1260 days. So he has this quick conversion to where he has to sign a treaty and then move to abomination 1260 days later, because God only gives him so long on this planet. And that clearly indicates it's a short period of time of 1260 days to abomination. So I believe the Christians will see this 3-day resurrection event and think Jesus has come back, and that they basically are going to be deceived, and Antichrist could come back looking like a resurrected Jesus and confuse even the churches, and so there will be a massive falling away from the churches, where it will actually be an Allah type figure with an Islamic agenda and trying to convert the churches, with the Pope as a false prophet basically breaking the churches in the middle of all this. And so he's going to be saying, yeah, you go join that guy called Antichrist, but I'm not going to say he's Antichrist. And so it indicates that since Antichrist only has about 1260 days after he returns, this will force the other three regions to fall quickly, and the signing of the 7-year treaty will have to happen almost immediately. And then he says that the host will be given against him the daily sacrifices on reason of transgression, and he will be cast down the truth to the ground, and it prophesied and prospered. So Antichrist will prosper on the ground as he moves forward into those 1260 days, into abomination of desolation. And then it indicates that one of the saints was speaking to another saint, and they asked how long the vision concerning the daily. Now this is important here. Look at how he lays this down. The vision concerning the daily sacrifices, which are the continual burnt offerings, the transgression of desolation, which is abomination of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. Okay, and that he indicates that that would be 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary would be cleansed. So I keep telling you, this is extremely important right here. He talks about the continual burnt offerings. He talks about abomination of desolation. He talks about how it will be trampled for 1260 days, and then we would have a area of cleansing, which would be the Feast of Tabernacles, because at that point we would be with God, and God would already pour down the bowls. And so you need to look at the Feast of Tabernacles of 27, which is on October 16th and 17th. And that at that point God will have cleansed the earth and basically dropped the bowls on the wicked, and then we're getting ready to move into the millennial stage. So I indicate that the 2300 days are from the time the vision occurs, the daily sacrifices or the continual burnt offerings are removed, 1260 days from the signing of the 7-year treaty with the nations to abomination of desolation to the time of the sanctuary is cleansed. That period of the 1200 or 2300 day period falls between June 30th to 2021, which I had on my chart already, runs through October 17th of 2027. October 17th of 2027 would be the last day of the fall feast of 27. October 16th and 17th of 2027 would complete the Feast of Tabernacles of 27, which means that if we're in the Tabernacles or the Feast of Tabernacles, we are with God, or among God is among us. Let's put it that way. I should say it that way. And so that is extremely important, and that would then fulfill the fall feast prior to the strong generational end, which would happen on May 14th of 2028. So Daniel moves forward, and he's going to now give you interpretation. And I know this is a long video, but there's a lot of information, and it matters to the paradigm, and it matters to you in the next couple months as Israel's getting ready to light up in front of you. So Daniel was talking about, he has this vision, he's looking for meaning, and so Gabriel comes down and he gives him understanding of the vision, and he indicates that it's for the end of the time. So it's an end times vision. And he indicates, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for the time appointed the end shall be. So he's talking about the very end of time here. And what does he go right to? Immediately, Medo-Persians. Okay, Daniel 8. It's extremely important. You understand that Turkey's getting ready to invade against the Kurds, and that's going to then align the Kurds with Persia over time in the next couple of years to where Iran will fall, but that's not immediate. Iran's already in this game and is a partner with Turkey right now. But that's going to change because Turkey's going to go against them as they push the Kurds away from that area into Iran's court, and then when those two countries align, they will just finally destroy them. But that's going to take some time, and that probably doesn't happen until approximately 2025, and I've added that to the paradigm because I think it matters. So when you get into 20, he talks about this interpretation. He's going to show him what he means by this vision. So he wants Daniel to understand. So he's going to reiterate it so we understand also. So he's talking about the kings of Medo, Persia, Kurds, Iran. That the ram portrays the Kurds and Iran, and that we would see the king of Grecia, which is the king of Turkey, come against this nation and crush them. Okay, both of them. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, we talk about those four regions. Once the 10 nations of radicalized nations are destroyed, we see four regions rise up. The four winds are held on the seventh seal. They're released on the sixth trumpet. You have the first four trumpets devastate 1/3 of the planet or the communist area. Satan is thrown down to heaven on the fifth trumpet and rises on the sixth trumpet. And then he indicates this: in the latter time of their kingdom, when a transgressor shall come to full, a king of fierce consonants, AntiChrist, and understanding of dark sentences will stand up. So you're talking about AntiChrist riding on the sixth trumpet. The false prophet rises on the sixth trumpet. That's right after the bottomless pit opens on the fifth trumpet. So that's extremely important. And if you understand what's happening there, Michael is standing on the bottomless pit, pulling Satan from heaven to the earth for the presentation of Antichrist for the 1260 days as we move forward. And so Satan will give the authority on earth for 1260 days, 3.5 years, or 42 months. So Antichrist has that ability to sign the treaty and get to abomination of desolation. These 1260 days occur between the signing of the 7-year treaty and abomination of desolation. The 144,000 elect will battle against Antichrist with the truth of the word of God. Many elect, martyrs, and saints will be killed by Antichrist for their testimony. It indicates that through Christ's policy, that he shall prosper in his craft, that he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall be destroyed many. And so a lot of people are going to die. Approximately 1/3 of the population will be killed through this process. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And why is that? Because the Lord will come back and destroy him during the bowl phase, during the sixth bowl. And so it won't be about a sword that destroys Antichrist. It'll be about the sword of the Lord's mouth and his truth that comes from them that destroys and cuts through these nations, because the truth of God is more powerful than any physical weapon that we have. It indicates that Antichrist will control the earth for 1260 days, 3.5 years, or 42 months. After the signing of the 7-year treaty with nations, abomination occurs 1260 days, 3.5 years, or 42 months later. The two witnesses are overcome by Antichrist shortly after abomination of desolation. Remember, the two witnesses come out and prophesy for 1260 days, so they'll appear about the time the signing of the treaty occurs, and then they'll prophesy to abomination of desolation. The two witnesses lie in the streets for 3.5 days and are resurrected. That's similar to the Lord was resurrected in 3 days or so. Same thing with Antichrist. He'll be resurrected in approximately 3 days or so. The seventh trumpet occurs, and the people left from great tribulation are resurrected or raptured. And these are the people that are still left alive. They're not the dead people. The only ones that are resurrected are live people. That's why you need to get to the seventh trumpet, and it's so important that you make it there and you understand what's coming, because if you understand what's coming, you'll prepare properly for what's coming up in the next 1,369 days or whatever it is on my calendar here. 7 bowls of God's wrath are poured out on the wicked. This hour of God's wrath happens during the fall feast of 27. 1 hour of God's time is 15 days of our time on earth. The fall feasts of 27 occur between October 2nd and 17th of 2027. In my opinion, I believe the rapture occurs on the Feast of Trumpets of 27 on October 2nd of 27 during a sabbatical Saturday. Then it indicates the division of the evenings and mornings, which should ring a bell because he's talking about the 2,300 days here in Daniel 12, which are told to you are true. Therefore shut up thou vision, for it is for many days. And then Daniel fainted because he was sick, because he understood the vision and it mattered to him. So it's extremely important that when he talks about the vision of the evening and the mornings, he's talking about Daniel 12 and how he's talking about those 2,300 days. And I'm getting ready to show you the paradigm and how I've changed everything here. And so those 2,300 days run from the June 30th, 2021 date, 2,300 days to the Feast of Tabernacles on October 17th of 2027. And so we've been in this birth, pain, and sorrows event for some time now, and we're getting ready to move into tribulation once that signing of the treaty with the 7-year treaty with the nations occurs. Then you start into tribulation, because tribulation is for 1260 days. Once the abomination of desolation occurs, then you move into great tribulation, and that's why he indicates in Revelation 15 1 and 2, and as you move forward there, that these people come from great tribulation, that have been raptured out of great tribulation. And you need to understand those demarcations. So I wasn't going to go quite this deep into this video, but I think it's extremely important, so we might as well just get it done and explain everything up front. So if you go to endofdayssurvival.com, you can go look at my free Wix site. You can go down the page to these 4 PDFs. You click on this 4th PDF and it takes you to the paradigm, which I'm getting ready to show you. Now this is the paradigm, but it's changed, but it hasn't really changed that much. After I explain it to you, I believe you're going to understand this better, and it will make more sense, and it will actually give you more dates and more depth to understanding. Whether or not this happens, I can't guarantee it. It just seems like it's getting ready to take effect, and so it might just be that these dates are off a little bit, but I believe the events are going to happen in the fashion that they occurred in the past, so it gives you a roadmap to the future. So the charts change because I made a mistake, and I'll be the first one to admit when I make mistakes, because I'm a human and I'm flawed just like the rest of you, and I'm a sinner, so I make mistakes, and God corrects me when I make mistakes prior to the events happening, as I can see. At least that's what I believe is going on here. So what has changed on this chart? What has changed on this chart is I made a calculation error when I did my date conversion, and no one caught it out here, and I finally caught it, and it matters. It only affects 2 dates though, But they both matter. The original date was on this one here, which was the signing of the 7-year treaty, I had on April 20th of 2024, which was Hitler's birthday, and that's wrong. The reason that's wrong, and the reason I figured it out, is because when I go from October 2nd to 2027 and run 1,335 days, it wasn't right. It also wasn't making sense because I kept telling you the amount of days you have left to the Feast of Trumpets on October 2nd, and that we were down to like 35 days before the start of the signing of the treaty. Okay? So when I see something like that, I'll immediately flag myself and go, that can't work. And I'll be the first one to admit when I see something that I'm flagging, and then I'm going to tell you that I made a mistake, because that's what a good analyst does. The second date that was changed because of this same problem was that from the 1290 days from abomination of July 19th, 1290 days back gives us January 6th of 2024. That original date was March 31st of 2024. So I had a couple numbers wrong. And what happened then, though, is instead of being in like April and March, you're now in February and January, okay? So see how that compressed you. So I hope you're getting ready, because things are getting compressed quicker than I thought they would. So I went back and checked, the 2,300 days was right. So between October 17th and June 30th of 21, there's 2,300 days. This area is right here because we have the 7 bowls of God's wrath, or the hour of God's wrath, which is 15 days between the 17th of October and October 2nd. So that number was right. This number was right between the 75 days, which is the 1,260 days plus the 75 days gives you the 1,335 days. But the 1,335 days was wrong, okay? And that's where I messed up. One of these two numbers, okay? And nobody caught this but me. I'm just saying, it's interesting that we caught it right before this potentially could happen. So the 1,335 days from October 2nd all the way back, 1,335 days, ends up on February 5th. And if you take the secondary number of July 19th, which did not change on my paradigm, and run that 1,290 days back, I had calculated this wrong too, that ends up on January 6th of 2024. So the area through here really hasn't changed that much. It's just compressed the dates so that we're actually there within potentially 4 days of a potential invasion by Turkey, as I've watched him really get frustrated with the situation out here, and he's calling Netanyahu Hitler, and we're getting ready to watch another front from Hezbollah move through, and that takes you to 2 Kings 24, and all these different things are happening. You got the Red Sea exploding out here. You got all kinds of different things going on. So we're going to zoom into this area here, and I want to explain to you how this has changed. And then I've also added these additional sections down here, and I've tried to blow this stuff up better so you can read it, and I've changed the chart a little bit so a lot of these different things are a little bit larger so they're easier to see. And so let's blow this up, and I want to show you how this has changed real quick. So when you get into this chart, you realize that this section through here has not changed. And then we got to that October 9th date where we saw Hamas attack into Israel on October 7th. We had a retaliatory strike approximately 2 days later from Israel on October 9th, and that was a date that I had called approximately a couple months prior to the actual date actually happening. And so that's extremely important. So that was my first confirmation that the paradigm seemed to be right and that we were moving forward, except for maybe the invasion of Turkey originally on October 9th of 2019 when he did his original invasion into Syria and Iraq. So I'm going to go to the top chart and I'll move down so you can see the different pieces. So I indicate that Ezekiel in 38 and 39 starts to form, and that Erdogan unites 10 radical Muslim nations and they join Turkey against Israel. And that's happening since Hamas and October 7th. He's been running all over the place, getting everybody lined up, getting ready for this invasion, which I believe is going to happen on January 6th. And we would see this happen, which is interesting because it's the first day of the Jewish new month, which is Tevet 25, or in their calendar 5784. I believe that this would also be right before he invades, that Erdogan would stop the continual burnt offerings and make a dedication to Allah before they do the invasion, that their invasion goes well against Israel and they accomplish all their goals or whatever they do through that Ottoman nightmare that they're creating out here. Then I had indicated on 10 Tevet, back in the day when Jerusalem was originally sieged on January 15th of 588 BCE, that we would see potentially an attack on January 15th of 2024. Now, this number's changed a couple times, and so I know that people are going, oh, not another number. It's sort of changed for a reason. The original number was October 10th of 23. Then we changed that Gregorian calendar date to a Hebrew calendar date. That took me to 10 Tevet of 12/22 of 23. And then I realized, okay, if we're talking about 10 Tevet and it happens on this very specific day in time of history, that actually occurs on January 15th of 588 BCE. And so I think maybe we could potentially see an attack, an actual siege on Jerusalem from all 10 nations, literally on January 15th of 2024, that would then see a decimation of those armies on around January 30th, because he gives them 15 days of power, or 1 hour of power. The 15 days later is January 30th of 2024, and we would see those 10 nations or armies of Turkey and those alliances destroyed by the wrath of the Lamb, or Jesus, on the sixth seal event. We would start to see a seventh seal event where you have the half an hour of silence, the 144,000 selected, and prior to the 7 trumpets handed out, the 4 winds are being held back until Antichrist and the false prophet rise on the 6th trumpet, as it indicated in Daniel 8. You have the first 4 trumpets sound and destroy a third of the planet. Those are the communist areas, in my opinion. You have the 5th trumpet, the bottomless pit opens, and the scorpions come out and sting men for 5 months. As you move forward, you have the 6th trumpet, the rising of the Antichrist and the false prophet, and the release of the 4 winds. And then all that happens in 30 days between January 6th and February 5th. And I know you're saying, that is crazy. That is the fastest timeline I've ever seen. I can't imagine that God could ever pull anything like that off. But believe me, if it works within the parable of the fig tree chart, like I've been explaining to you, because the paradigm fit directly in the parable of the fig tree, that this could happen within the next 1,369 days or whatever we're at right now. So you move from January 6th, an invasion, to a destruction of 10 nations, a quarter of the world basically being placed under war, and God is literally attacking all these nations in their own countries, as well as against the mountains of Israel. And Erdogan, being the leader of Turkey, would die in his own country because he sends fire down upon Magog. So a quarter of the world is under war here. Then Gog is decimated and all these 10 nations are destroyed. Then we have a resurrection of event right after 4 trumpets decimate a third of the earth. There's a lot going on here as Antichrist gets ready to rise before February 5th. Antichrist rises between these periods of time. And so look at these times. You got January 6th and the invasion. You got the 15th, which is basically a siege on Jerusalem. 15 days later, you would see Erdogan and his nations get destroyed. And then you would bury him within a day or two, because they're not going to let Erdogan lay around. They're going to bury him. And 3 days later or so, we would see a resurrection event, and then he would immediately, because he only has a shortened period of time, it's 1260 days. So this dead Erdogan, Gog, rises into Antichrist. The other Muslims see this. The other three regions say, "Hey, this is something we can't tolerate, and we know what this is. This is Allah, so we're going to follow him. We'll capitulate." Turns into a beast kingdom, and then right after that, he signs the nation with treaty, the 7-year treaty with the nations on February 5th, and then we move forward. Now, as we move through this chart, I'm going to get into the second section here, and this is extremely important. So Isaac Herzog is captured at the original attack on Jerusalem on January 15th, and then his son takes over. And that son runs from approximately the time he's captured 100 days later, and then basically that kid is captured also around March 31st of 2024. But in that same breath, we see this siege on Jerusalem, the first siege, the first time, which occurs approximately on March 16th, and they captured this son of Isaac Herzog that was captured back here, which is the leader of Israel. His son takes control based on Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin, and then we see Zedekiah take over later in this process. And so Jehoiachin would take over for Isaac Herzog. He's in power for approximately 100 days. That ends on March 31st. Erdogan would have broken, or actually a resurrected Gog Erdogan, Antichrist now sieges Jerusalem for the first time. We have a secondary siege later in August of 25, which is approximately 18 months from January to August of this period here, and so that's about approximately 18-month period. So you have Antichrist sieging Jerusalem for the first time and basically making it matter here. So that's March 16th. You have the spring equinox as a start of spring on March 20th of 24. On March 31st of 24, that's the 100 days since Jehoiachin's been placed in position. Isaac Herzog has been removed by Antichrist and taken to Turkey. This would end his reign. He is then removed and taken into captivity, and then actually Reuben Rivlin is put in place, and so then he would move forward into 25 as we go forward into the future. Once you get into August 4th of 25, Reuben Rivlin is also captured. His eyes are removed. His two children or boys are killed, and he is then taken to Israel. He tries to escape during the second siege of Jerusalem and is caught on the plains of Jericho and literally captured and taken in front of Antichrist. And that happens 18 months later from the time Isaac Herzog is captured. Jehoiakim is placed into position here. Jehoiakim is then removed 100 days later. Zedekiah is put into place, and then he's also removed around August 4th of 2025. And so that's extremely important that we understand that it follows the same basic events that occurred in the past that are going to occur in the future. And so at the time of the signing of the treaty, you go into tribulations. Anything prior to the signing of the treaty, you are in the birth pains and sorrows here, as you can see. And then once you do abomination of desolation, you move into great tribulation. So I put those demarcations on here for a reason. But look at these other events that are happening. So Antichrist goes to the south first, so he goes against Egypt. Then he takes out Iran. So Turkey is pulled back from Turkey. Um, uh, Turkey is pulled back to Tyre, Lebanon from Egypt. Let me blow this up just a little bit more so you can see this a little better, hopefully. Turkey is then pulled back north from Egypt to Tyre, Lebanon, and then attacks the Kurds and then forces them to Erbil, which is the Battle of Gaugamela in the past. The Kurds then fall down to Baghdad, Iraq, and then Shush, Iran, and then Turkey destroys both these nations. And that makes sense because when you go to Daniel, and we talked about that, he goes south first. He goes down and hits Egypt, but he doesn't completely destroy them. He ends up back in Tyre. Then he goes to the east. He goes against the Kurds and Iran. He destroys Iran and the Kurds. And then he goes to the pleasant land back to Egypt. So it follows how prophecy is laid out in Daniel 8. So as we're having the secondary siege against Jerusalem and Israel, because Zedekiah is rebelling against AntiChrist once he's put in. He rebels against him for 18 months, and then basically he's captured and taken away also. So Reuben Revlin's rebelling about the time all this stuff started to happen. I'll guarantee he's in the process of this. And once the leader of Israel is removed and the son of Israel's leader is removed, Zedekiah or Reuben Revlin will have to step into these shoes. And so we will see basically Turkey go into Syria, down into Lebanon, down into towards Israel, down around Jerusalem, and between Jerusalem and Jordan, down into Gaza, to Egypt. They come back to Tyre. They end up going against the Kurds. The Kurds are drove to Erbil, to Gaugamela. They're pushed down to Baghdad. Then they're pushed to Shush. Once they hit Shush and pull between Baghdad and Shush, they would see the Kurds align with the Persians or Iran. And then when that happens, we would see Turkey crush them. And then once that happens, and we're in 25 now, which I thought was before this, and now it's not. It indicates clearly, if you look at how it's laid out, that Iran won't fall right away. It takes some time for this to happen, and they will come back against Iran, but Iran will join them originally, and most of these countries will be decimated up front on the sixth seal. So they're going to have a lot to think about before they attack anyone else for a while, because God's going to take care of a lot of their infrastructure on that sixth seal event. Then you have Egypt under duress. The king of Egypt and his people are basically cut off. Then Turkey goes up against the Kurds and Iran. Then he comes back against Israel because it indicates that the famine is so severe in Israel, no food is found. On August 24th of 25, the walls are broken down. The residue of the people are taken away to Babylon. Reuben Revlin is also taken away. His kids are destroyed and killed. His eyes are plucked out. He's removed to Turkey. Then we have on September 14th of 2026, the son of Netanyahu kills that regional leader, because once Reuben Revlin is removed and taken away, Antichrist puts in a regional leader for a very short period of time. He lasts for no time at all. Then the son of Netanyahu, or Netanyahu, kills this regional leader. The son of Netanyahu proclaims a fast before the Lord on around November of 26. December 14th of 26, Jerusalem, Israel are smitten and utterly destroyed. February 16th of 27, God places a lamentation against Egypt, and God states that he will destroy everything there. On March 3rd of 27, Egypt is cast down and the peoples are destroyed. The king of Egypt is killed by Antichrist, and that king of Egypt has just been re-elected, which is Al-Sisi, and so that will probably be the king in place when this all happens. And then when you get into The July 19th of 2027, you get to Abomination of Desolation, and I did make a number of these things much larger so you can see them. So all I'm saying is that the paradigm is basically the same. Once I realized that I had made this date conversion problem and fixed it, and you can see how I did it here. So how did that mistake occur? Probably I copied one chart onto another chart, and over time it got adjusted, and then I didn't realize it, and so it just stayed that way for a while. But if I go back to one of my original charts, one of my original videos, you'll actually see a February 5th date on there, and so somehow it got adjusted and nobody caught it, and I didn't see it until just now. So if you take October 2nd of 2027 and subtract 1,335 days, that takes you to February 5th of 2024. And so that's why that date changed from April 20th of 2024, which is Hitler's birthday, to February 5th of 2024, because that makes it proper. And I always want to be proper, and so if you subtract the 1,335 days from October 2nd of 27, it gives you that February 5th date of 2024. And the second date I got wrong, which nobody caught, and I didn't see it until just now, right before all this stuff's getting ready to break, is this July 19th of 2027 date, which is Abomination of Desolation on my chart. You subtract 1,290 days, that takes you to January 6th of 2024. So that's why those numbers change, because this January 6th date was originally March 21st of 2024. But it's not right, because if you subtract 1,290 days from this date, it doesn't give you March 21st. It gives you January 6th. And so we're there. And that's why this is so important that I think I report this to you guys, is because we're moving into January 6th right now, which is potential an invasion from Turkey and a potential siege on Jerusalem by January 15th. And a destruction of a sixth seal event in January 30, which would be terrible, because that would be during the middle of winter, especially here. It's going to be extremely cold. Well, it hasn't been so far this year, but it could be extremely cold and nasty. So that's extremely important that we understand that we could see a sixth seal event rock the whole planet around January 30th based on my paradigm. And so I wanted to show you why that I made these mistakes. And I did not catch it until just now, and no one else caught it. So I just want to let you know that I'm a flawed individual, and I correct things, and I want to make sure that you always understand where these things occur and how they occur. And all I've basically done on this bottom portion, I'll just blow it up here real quick so you guys can see it. I basically just reiterated all the things that I just talked about. How Ezekiel 38 has to happen. It forms around the same time Daniel 8 starts. That basically we'll see an attack prior to Hamas on Israel on October 7th to 24th. So we saw that original invasion by Hamas on October 7th. Then we had that October 9th date up here on my paradigm, which indicated that we would see a retaliatory strike by Israel, and that we've seen these 10 nations of Muslims form as Erdogan's been meeting with all these leaders in the last few months, and I've got articles about this. Erdogan is going to lead an invasion possibly around the 6th of January, and we'll see a total siege on Jerusalem by January 15th, which would then end Ezekiel 38 and 39 through a sixth seal event. Daniel 8 completes once AntiChrist rises, attacks Egypt first, the Kurds and the Medes second, and Iran and Persia second, and Israel third, as I indicated a couple different times on the paradigm and how it runs through Daniel 8. These attacks start shortly after Antichrist rises and signs a 7-year treaty. This indicates that Erdogan invades Syria and Iraq on 1/6 of 24, an invasion by proxies led by Lebanon, West Bank, Golan Heights, Iraq, Syria, Palestine attack Israel on approximately 1:15 to 24. That's extremely important because you can go to 2 Kings 24 and see that same process occurring there. The destruction of the 10 nations of radical Muslims on potentially January 30th of 24. Erdogan is buried in Turkey within 1 to 2 days and resurrects, that's spelled wrong, into Antichrist 3 days later, just before 5 of 24. Antichrist will mimic Jesus' resurrection because it's approximately about a 3-day event, and so he'll look like it's Jesus coming out of this grave or this abyss when it's actually an Allah event, and it's going to exalt Islam. And this will be a problem for the churches because the Antichrist is followed by the false prophet, which is probably the Pope, and he will break the churches. 10 nations form down to 4 regions. Antichrist overthrows 3 regions. The beast kingdom forms from the footprint of the 4 regions, which were 10 nations to start. You can see that happening in basically Daniel 7:24, 10 regions first, then after them a little horn rises and overthrows 3 other regions. And this indicates that basically what I've just been talking about. Iran originally joins Turkey against Israel, and they're part of this original 10 nation, and they're as a nation as Iran. And if you go into Ezekiel 38 and 39, it's indicated that Persia is part of this, but I thought they had been absorbed through Daniel 8. That isn't necessarily the case. Daniel 8 could actually happen after the original first siege on Jerusalem, and then Iran is absorbed before the second siege of Jerusalem 18 months later. Antichrist, well, the 10 nations are destroyed on the 6th seal. Antichrist rises and controls the whole region or the beast kingdom from the footprint of the 4 regions that are reduced down from the 10 regions originally. Antichrist will attack the Kurds once he is pulled back to Egypt. The Kurds will be forced to align with Iran. And then we see the destruction of both those nations once they align by Turkey. Then Antichrist brings a second siege against Jerusalem and completes this all by August 4th of 2025. So these are the changes that I've made. I've added this out on the site. I have adjusted these sections mainly. The rest of the chart really hasn't changed, and really the only 2 things that changed the chart was because I realized I had made a mistake on the addition and subtraction of the 1335 days and the 1290 days, which then once I figured that out gave us these very specific dates and time. And so I think it matters, and I needed to bring this information to your attention. So God bless everybody. I hope this makes some sense. I wanted to bring this to your attention immediately, because if it is right, and I don't know if it's right and going to play out as we move forward into February 5th here, and we see this potential signing of a treaty of nations, that we could potentially see a siege by Turkey, or an invasion by Turkey, a siege on Jerusalem by proxies, and then a potential destruction of 10 nations on a 6th seal event at the end of January, on January 30th, as we move into a resurrectional nightmare as we move into February 5th of 2024, and we start tribulation and a signing of the treaty with the 7-year treaty with the nations, as you move forward 1260 days into abomination of desolation. I thought I needed to get this out as quickly as possible to you. Whether it will happen or not, we're going to find out soon. You're going to know in about 4 to 30 days whether this is actually starting to play out and whether this is going to matter to you all. And I'll be the first one to admit when it's wrong. Okay? But so far, I'm up to January 9th here, and it seems to be right. And then I talked about this 10 Tibet event on January 15th. That plays right into what I'm talking about. The only difference here is Daniel 8 does not complete first before Ezekiel 38 and 39 finishes. Ezekiel 38 and 39 finishes first on the sixth seal, and then Daniel 8 continues, and we don't really see a destruction of Iran until approximately 2025, around the spring of 2025. I think that really matters to the paradigm, and it makes more sense because there's no way Turkey could do this in basically a few days. So it follows the Bible, it follows Daniel 8, and I believe that once you get into all the other prophecies I'm going to show you forward, it follows them also because they all say the same thing as I've been stating for years. So God bless everybody. Keep an eye on this stuff. I just posted a video about the Red Sea, so go check that out. Like these videos, and please share them to your friends. If you see any content or merit in what I'm presenting to you, please share it with others, because it's our job to try to preserve our family and friends and get them to the end of the story and get them over the finish line so that they can be either resurrected on the seventh trumpet, or at least be placed in the book of life and see the eternity at the end, and that your family members will make it to the end of the story. And so it's extremely important that you understand what's happening in front of you, you explain it to your people, and you watch what's happening in current events and align them up with what the Bible tells us, and you will see a picture that most people don't get out here, because he gives you everything in the Bible to understand to what is happening in the past as well as what's coming up in the future. And he says that all things will be explained to you prior to them happening, that he will illuminate you, because it's revelation. It's an illumination, a revelation to you about what is happening to the end. And he wrote you a whole book about it so that he explained it to you so you'd have some idea what is coming and you wouldn't be in the dark. An apocalypse means basically means an unveiling. So God bless everybody and have a great night.